Hello, everybody, and welcome to this interview presented by Canadians for Homeopathy. Today, we're very pleased to be with Deborah Collins. Deborah was born on Vancouver Island, Canada, and moved to Holland in her early 20s, where she went through medical school. Long before studying medicine, she had been searching for ways to heal deeply and effectively, and this search continued all through her medical studies, looking into nutrition, shiatsu, herbalism, anthroposophy, and other domains before taking her first course in homeopathy during the last years of her medical training. After graduating, she went straight into homeopathic practice in 1985. Training in inner child therapy and past life regression brought an even broader approach to the care of the patient and a deeper understanding of what needs to be healed. Teaching since 1988, at first throughout Holland, then throughout Europe and further abroad, which eventually led to a move to New Zealand, where she continued to practice and teach. She's written countless articles for homeopathic journals, became co-editor of Interhomeopathy, an online journal that's no longer functioning, and Spectrum of Homeopathy. She's written a guide to the plant theory of Jan Scholten. She currently works and lives in France, but plans to move back to Canada in the near future. Her work is inspired and enriched by the work of several modern homeopaths, notably Jan Scholten, Mikhail Yakir, Rajan Sankran, Lou Klein, Jeremy Shear, as well as our old masters. So welcome, Deborah. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you, Victor. And I'm really pleased. Thank you for your invitation. It's kind of fun to feel like I'm gradually becoming part of the Canadian scene again, especially since I have this plan to move back to my home country, Canada, in the near future.
Hmm. Okay, so we thought that we would start the discussion today by talking about the question of methodology in homeopathy. And one of the ways that we can start thinking about this question or topic um, is by, in a way, exploring the question of novelty. Yeah, because a methodology, a new methodology, or an emerging methodology is a kind of novelty that emerges in a particular scientific domain. And I think that there is kind of a resistance in homeopathy, as well as in every branch of medicine, between the fixation on older ways of doing things and the rejection of novelty, and then those that fully embrace novelty and sometimes even turn their backs to what preceded it. And so perhaps we can start exploring this question of methodology, what modern homeopathy entails, how it relates to, and perhaps in some ways diverges from older paradigms of understanding what homeopathy is, even because that's not a
Hmm.
settled question itself.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Good. And, I like the expression that some people use, some people who are very innovative, that they talk about, I can see further because I stand on the shoulders of giants. And to me, I like that idea. And some of our modern homeopaths, actually, many of our modern homeopaths are extremely well versed in traditional, solid homeopathy as well. A lot of them are doctors, a lot of them are not, but they have a very solid foundation. And so this is, what I talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. And then when you do so, you can see further and you want to broaden your horizons. You want to, as someone in the medical profession and especially homeopathy, you when we get started in homeopathy, you think, oh, this is great. And most of us have what we call beginner's luck, and everything goes well, and you think, oh, this is easy. Well, that happened for me, and I thought, oh, this is just great. I had the basics. I started way back in the 80s, and it just went swimmingly. And I thought, well, this is easy. And I got to know a little bit more, and I thought, hey, this is complicated. And so did some of my very outstanding colleagues. Now, I worked a long time, as you mentioned, in Holland, and one of my very good buddies from those early days is Jan Scholten, who before he studied medicine even. He studied chemistry and then philosophy, and he studied medicine. He thought he might become a psychiatrist, and then he thought, actually, it doesn't go deep enough. He studied homeopathy, and like me, was thinking, this is great. And then noticed that it sometimes didn't go deep enough, and that the cures and the answers that we could find with the methods we had been taught, which are basic methods, which everyone needs to learn. You need to learn the organon. You need to learn to repetize. You need to learn your basic remedies. You need to learn them well. You need to familiarize yourself with them. And yet, even with a very, very solid foundation in that, he was saying there must be more. Why do we have, if you think of homeopathy as being um, a, a study of individuality, and that a homeopathic remedy is ideally just individualized, then the best homeopath is the one who can individualize the best. He or she is the one who really can understand exactly what that patient needs, and then has developed a way of looking all through nature and even beyond nature, because we use everything, to find exactly that remedy which specifically suits that person. And he, like me, realized that we had sort of limited ourselves in our homeopathic study to a rather limited um, collection of remedies that we could sort of learn by heart or that we could repetize, and that these might do some good. These, for instance, what we call the polycrests, these are our so-called big remedies, and these are basically the ones that the founding homeopath Samuel Hahnemann worked with in those years. That's 200 years ago. And since that time, we've expanded our array of possible homeopathic remedies. But to have to learn them all by heart, I mean, there are thousands of them. We could potentially use, at the moment, there are about 9,000 remedies available. How can you memorize them all? How can you even repetize them all? And so I just start with Jan Scholten, being the brilliant man that he is, made a very logical step, being a chemist and a homeopath and a doctor. He went back to the minerals, which are the base of what we work with, and he put out a first book called Minerals and Homeopathy, where he instead of looking individually at our remedies, he said, well, we have, for instance, all kinds of remedies that are calcium remedies, remedies with a basis of calcium, like calcium carbonicum, one of our very well-known remedies. We also have calcium fluoratum, calcium silicata, calcium bromatum, calcium arsenicosum, etc. But why don't we have calcium muriaticum? Because muriaticum or chlor, that's a very basic element, like in natrium muriaticum. Anyway, he studied all the calcium remedies, and he said, what is common in these remedies with calcium? And he found a common denominator in all these remedies that start with calcium. And then branching off from that, he said, okay, but say we have calcium and you combine it with arsenicum, what makes the difference between calcium arsenicum and calcium carbonicum? So what he found for calcium was the theme of the calciums, and I'll actually take out his book, which I always have right beside me. So he said, "What is the theme of the calciums that puts all these together?" So I'll look up okay, I'll take any one of these, the calciums. 27. This book changed my practice. And it changed the practice almost immediately of all the homeopaths in Holland, where it was brought out first. Suddenly, we could prescribe remedies we hadn't been able to prescribe before, and we understood them. So, one of the themes of the calcium is what would other people say? So they're very sensitive to the thoughts of other people. That makes them very sensitive to criticism. It makes them very uncertain. There are a lot of anxieties, and they have a tendency to withdraw into themselves. Calcium carbonicum, one of our most well-known calcium remedies, is made from the inner lining of the oyster shell, which has this tendency to withdraw into itself, feeling very sensitive, so they withdraw. So he noticed that the same theme came back in all the calcium remedies, but each one had a different coloring depending on um, which um, which one it was associated with. So it might be bromatum, it might be arsenicum, it might be carbonicum, it might be sulfuricum. Each one had a different coloring. And then the next step was to understand, what is a sulfuricum? What does that relate to? What is a bromatum? And so he not only was able to understand that through a vast knowledge of materia medica, he was able to extract the themes that went with, for instance, bromatum, which has a lot to do with passion, but also with guilt, feeling guilty. So calcium, bromatum, you can put that together and say, I am concerned about what people think. They might think I'm guilty, or they might think I'm too passionate. Yeah. Calcium nitricum. Nitricum is expansive. So it's in TNT. So it has to do with enthusiasm, being out there, which is why the nitricums are high blood pressure remedies. Wow, explosive, out there. Calcium nitricum can be, people might think I'm too enthusiastic. So I tend to shrink a bit. And yet there's this other part of me that wants to be explosive, that wants to be out there. So this was a first step in looking at our remedies in a different fashion. And it made a huge leap for a lot of us in homeopathy. We suddenly started to be able to prescribe remedies by listening to our patients in a different way, by listening to not only what they were saying, what their complaints are, but also what are the themes that underlie their complaints, and how do we hear this in their life stories? Yeah. So he did this for a lot of our common minerals, and I mean, honestly, my practice just patients who I'd been stuck with for a long time, suddenly I could find remedies like Barita iodatum, which I wouldn't have known how to prescribe before, worked like a dream. Or he made a remedy, calcium muriaticum, which before that barely existed, and suddenly all kinds of people know how to use that because of his system. So this made waves, and as you were saying, when you make waves, it can also disturb people because they say, "Well, this isn't what Hahnemann said," and yet it was working. Yeah, so great. So that made a huge impact, and the book was translated into many languages. I would I teach a lot, and every time I teach to new homeopathic students, I actually begin with this book. Apart from their basic homeopathic training, I say, read this book and it will explain homeopathy to you in a way that you will be able to understand, and you'll be able to recognize these stories in your friends, in your families, in your neighbors. Yeah, so this was a really good start.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
There's so much to elaborate on here. And I just want to make the point that there is a always a degree of contingency whenever certain principles in science are developed. And even when we think back to the origins of homeopathy and Hahnemann himself, if we imagine for a second that, say, Hahnemann had been born in China or in India rather than where he was born in Europe, and he still went ahead and developed homeopathy, well, of course, the materia medica would have been different because the remedies that he was called to develop had historical, cultural, and medical significance. Yeah.
Mm,
And so it wasn't simply that these substances that Hahnemann chose were innately known to be the
mm,
only substances that could have curative powers. They had symbolic meaning and significance, cultural connotations. And even when we look at Hahnemann's Materia Medica, the remedies with the three largest entries are sulfur, salt, and mercury, which, of course, in the alchemical worldview are the three fundamental principles
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
of
good
all
point.
creation. And so it's not by chance. Yeah.
It's not by chance. Yeah, yeah. And yet it's a very good point saying that, he was born in Germany, so he chose the things from around him. And had he been born in Nepal or in South Africa or somewhere like that, he might have chosen different things. This is what we're expanding into these days, to be far more open to all the abundance of nature and not just sticking to the remedies that he created at that time. But these days, in you might say in a modern homeopathic practice, we are developing remedies from birds, from fossils, from stones. I have a stone in my hand at the moment, given to me by a friend who is very, very versed in working with stone remedies. We work with trees. We work with the energy from planets. You name it. We work with the various waters of the world. You cannot think of something that one or other homeopath at this moment is not delving into and exploring. And so, in order to be able to accurately make use of this immense body of work that is being brought forward, we need methods. Yeah. And this is what you were referring to before. The methods that it wasn't even Hahnemann who created repertories, it was Kent, because he decided we need a way of managing all this information. And so these days we work with repertories, but computerized repertories, and a lot of this information is being put in there. And still, how do what you put in there depends on what you've heard from the patient, what you've actually perceived. And this aspect of what you have perceived is very important as well, because we can only see what we see, and what we don't have in our you might say in our way of thinking, our way of being, we don't even see it. We don't even notice it, so we don't even go there. And someone might give us information in a certain direction. If that is not part of our way of thinking, it's not that we ignore it, we don't even hear it. So the modern way of homeopathy, you might say, as I say, I like to stand on the shoulders of giants, standing on this enormous body of traditional wisdom brought through by our great masters, and at the same time looking around us to see, hey, everything is possible, and but we need new methods for that.
Excellent. Yeah. And, fundamentally, what science is involved with is understanding the nature of reality. Yeah.
Mm,
And the science delusion, as Rupert Sheldrake calls it,
yeah,
is that we already understand the nature of reality in principle, and that only the details have to be filled in.
yeah.
And I think that this notion of the assumption that we already understand things Yeah, we already understand what homeopathy is. Homeopathy is already self-contained, finished in a sense.
Well,
In a way
thank
that
goodness
that
people
that
like Rupert are taking that paradigm apart rapidly. And there are lots of people, thank goodness, who are dismantling that paradigm. I mean, Rupert is famous for dismantling the paradigm of the four constants. He said they're not constant at all. And science knows this, and yet they pretend that the speed of light is a constant and gravity is a constant, and they're not. And he's great for dismantling our old paradigm.
yeah. But I mean, what I like about his thinking in relation to homeopathy is that, basically leads us to understand that if we want to understand homeopathy as a science, that means that it has to be approached as an open-minded method of inquiry and not a fixed belief system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this open-mindedness brings us back to the other aspect that I was saying. To be a homeopath, to be, I think, a good homeopath is as much about understanding the mysteries of oneself, the mysteries of one's soul, the mysteries and as in understanding our patient, because we can only help our patient to come as far as we have been able to expand in ourselves. We can't take them farther than that.
Hmm. Yeah, and also, the mysteries of remedies themselves, yeah, and how our evolving understanding is also reflective in terms of understanding what actually a homeopathic remedy is. Yeah, and really when we pick up a little vial of a remedy, Arnica 30C or whatever the remedy is, we're actually dealing with a little bit of transformed earth. Yeah, and the arnica plant is removed from the pellets or the liquid, but in a sense, the etheric structure of the plant has remained. Yeah, and that's something really to hold with great reverence. Um,
But actually, we for a long time we were fascinated with the idea of memory of water, saying, well, this explains, with Jacques Benavista and his memory of water and whatever. We were very happy with that, saying now we understand the working of homeopathy. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it goes even beyond that. Because what we have discovered, or perhaps it's not even a discovery, but what we are learning to accept is that sometimes you don't even need a remedy as such, you know. We It's crazy enough to think that we have these remedies that where the essence of it is extracted, but at least it's in these nice little white pills that we can give to someone. And we can sort of hide behind that, saying, "Well, I'm not an allopath, but at least I'm giving you something to take." Now, what if what we are giving them is actually an information in energy form? And there are many ways of transmitting that very specific information in energy form. And this is very controversial, and yet it works for those who have opened themselves wide enough to actually use that as a way of working. So it even at that, it expands. What is a homeopathic remedy? Is it just something that is in a pill, or is it a way of transferring? And we don't even know what it's transferring, but it seems to be transferring a very specific kind of information that the body and the soul requires at that moment to stimulate its own self-healing.
mhm.
So there are homeopaths, very established, very, very well-known homeopaths who are working with what they call noetic remedies. And these are remedies that are not even put into pillules. Although you can put this energy into pillules, but there's many ways of transmitting it. So we are working with mysteries here. And I can totally understand that this freaks some people out. And that's fine. We can also stay with what we know. And there are many levels of homeopathy. And I think that everyone should should be with the kind of homeopathy that they feel comfortable with. It's not necessary to make, and it's not good to make these huge leaps before you have established a really solid base.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's so many exciting things to explore and discover. And that's also, I think, a very important quality of the evolution of a science is this openness and willingness to explore, to try things out, to see what works, to see what doesn't work, and
Yeah,
expand the horizons. And that's how every science has evolved. Yeah, there's no
yeah.
exceptions really to that rule.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree.
Hmm.
It's an adventure. You have to be quite adventuresome, I might say. Well, as I was saying, there are different levels of homeopathy. You can work, and almost anyone can learn first aid homeopathy. And I would recommend everyone to learn first aid homeopathy and to have their little homeopathic kit in their handbag and in the car and whatever. I would recommend that to everyone because it is life-saving. Yeah, I have seen so many miracles take place with my little kit with, 35 remedies in it that's always in my handbag. And that is not difficult to learn. That's one level of homeopathy. And then you have more and more other levels where you go deeper, where you need to ask different questions, be open for different things. So there's many levels, and each homeopath finds their own level of competence and comfort.
Hmm. And of course, then every practitioner will attract the patients that they need to see too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So there's no right and wrong about it, and yeah, it's where you're at and what you're comfortable with.
Hmm. Yeah. And so perhaps to go back to this question of um, the expanding of the materia medica and being able to help patients that we were not able to help before. And one way to think of it is that with this expansion of the materia medica into so many domains beyond the well-known polycrest remedies into, all kinds of natural and human-made and all kinds of different groups and classes of remedies. And we start to see that, in a sense, all of the disease processes and every aspect, actually, of the immensely complicated human morphology is kind of a compendium or synthesis of all of the natural forms of the earth. Yeah. And
Well put, Victor, well put.
yeah, and then when we understand that, we see that these dynamic influences that we call remedies can bring about a kind of metamorphosis.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, in a sense, we have arrived to the point. One of the ways that I like to put it is that the diagnosis that we give to a patient is the remedy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a piece of nature that is speaking through the patient. Is that
Absolutely.
is that would you agree with that formulation?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that I like the way you put it, that we are a compendium and that we contain the whole of nature in us. We contain everything in us. Um, and there can be aspects of, you might say, our human history or our personal history where nature is calling out to us more because there's certain stuckness, you might say. Now, Jan has written, and he's not the only one, but he's written a beautiful book called Cure is Freedom. And that means that that to be cured, to be healed, we become more and more free. So we're not stuck in some pattern that is calling our attention to some past trauma that needs to be healed or something that might come from through the generations or past lives or whatever. So in finding a remedy that suits and resonates with a certain aspect of life, that frees that energy up so that we can use it in the here and now. Because freedom is really, healing is really having as much as possible of us in the here and now. But when bits and pieces of us are stuck somehow in the past, that's where remedies can come in. And when we are open enough to be able to perceive where that's come from, and to perceive the remedy that can resonate with that, that energy is freed for us now.
Mm. So perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit more about your own um, evolution in terms of perceiving what needs to be healed in patients and some methods and techniques that you've been led to in your search.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big question. How long do you have? I'll try to keep it short. I'll try to keep it short. Now, as I was saying, in the introduction that I sent you, long before I started studying medicine, I was fascinated by human nature, by human physiology. I find it fascinating. And so long before I studied medicine, I was looking into things like, where does illness come from? What makes somebody who eats the same food, breathes the same air, comes from the same family, what makes one person well and the other person not? And so this is a lifelong search. And I think to be a homeopath or to be in the healing arts, curiosity is a huge thing, as well as compassion. And the two go very well together. So, all through medical school, I was looking for, you know, what can heal at a deep level? What can help people to heal? And I had the very great miracle advantage of spending the first 3 years of my I was in Canada in Vancouver, going to university there, and I lived with my grandmother because she was closer to the university. And she was a woman light years before her time. So she read Krishnamurti. She was reading about miracles behind behind the Iron Curtain. She knew about the power of thought in healing. She knew how to meditate. She knew about good nutrition. And I was supposed to be studying, and all I was doing was reading her library and having these amazing conversations with her. And so at one point, I remember her saying to me, "Well, my dear, um, when you understand past lives, it will open up a lot of understanding for you." And so, of course, I zipped to that part of her library. But I didn't do anything with that for many, many years until I had graduated from medical school. I was doing homeopathy. And I thought, what this person is telling me doesn't fit with what their life story is. I mean, I'm getting inklings of things that sound like they don't belong to their family history or whatever. And so I started sending some of my patients to past life regression therapists. And I would get the information back, and I would find a remedy that matched the situation that it felt like that person was stuck in. And if it was the good remedy, that person would heal. I'll give you a few examples. It's a long story, but I've written it up. I have in Holland a whole series of patients who, um, through, in the first place, through past life regression, it seemed that they had been gassed in the concentration camps, and that their ailments from this lifetime had to do with being poisoned in the past. And so, as a homeopath, you look up what is the poison that they used, which is known, Cyclone B, which is hydrocyanic acid. So I ordered that as a remedy. And lo and behold, this enormous array of complaints in all these various patients just disappeared like snow in the sun. And I had already been working this way for a long time, but I have a lot of experience around that. And so that was a fairly easy one. And then you get all these people who've been burned at the stake and whatever. So I looked for all kinds of remedies that went to do with that. So that was one aspect that I ended up developing a lot of feeling for, you might say. So you start to listen in a different way to what someone is telling you. You listen not only to the complaints, but I sort of have a little inner set of scales in my mind that says, is what someone is telling me with their present complaints, does that match with the depth of what they are saying it comes from? Now, here in France, a lot of people who have, for instance, psychological problems, they might go to a psychoanalyst, and they will come to me after years of psychoanalysis. They will come to me and say, you know, I have this incredibly deep depression ever since childhood. No amount of psychotherapy or medication is helping. But my psychotherapist says, well, you know, your father slapped your bottom once when you were a baby, and I'm sure that it came from that. And I'm going, does this match the fact that you keep having these nightmares about being walking with this long procession of people through the snow, you're barefoot, you're starving? Um, does that, does that match up? And so I would go more with these dreams, these daytime images of someone in a death procession than being slapped once on their bottom as a baby. Even though all the psychiatrists in the world would say, you know, that's that one slap that did it. I'd say it doesn't match for me. So I tend to have this sort of set of scales in my mind that go, does the complaint match the cause? And it has, for me, it has to match 100%. Yeah. So I look for something that matches 100% and I put my remedy there. Now, it could be definitely from childhood. And so I often end up going right to, this is why I did a training in inner child as well, because a lot of complaints do come from our very early years. You know, the feeling we might have someone of 80 who somehow reminds you of a small child. There might be a court judge, and yet in their home they might be just like, you know, their behavior might be just like a small child. And I'm thinking of an example that have a court judge who I think, well, you're pretty much and so you might give them small child remedies, but it might go even beyond that. These days in homeopathy, we also work with remedies, what they call matrodonal remedies, and these are remedies from the womb, like placenta, like amniotic fluid, like vernix, which is the baby grease, the grease around the baby, umbilical cord. And these have to do with various states. It might be the mother, when she was pregnant, was going through a very hard time, and the child, later the adult, might still be stuck in a situation that resembles a state in the womb. Now, I'll give you an example of that. Some years ago, a young man and both his parents came to me, and this young man was so terrified that he didn't dare to go to school. So he stayed in the safe womb of his home and he had to do homeschooling. And I sort of assumed that something had gone on during pregnancy. So I asked his parents, they said, oh no, it was perfect. The pregnancy was perfect. But it didn't make sense to me. And I gave a remedy that didn't do anything. And they came back. And I said, you know, please tell me about the pregnancy. I don't understand this. And the mother said, well, this one was good, unlike the 5 pregnancies before where it had miscarriages. So actually, I was terrified during the whole pregnancy that he would die too. So I gave this young man, 18 years old, I gave him some of these remedies from the intrauterine period. I never saw him again, but his mother sent me an email and a photo of him a year later saying that was a miracle. It was like a rebirth. He said, now I'm going to cut the umbilical cord. He didn't even know what I had given him. He moved away from home. He said, I want to go out there. He said, I want to go to a boarding school. I want to start living. He joined a rugby team. His mother said, thank you for your help. but we're a little bit distressed because we hardly see him these days. He's leading his life. So we use a lot of different aspects in homeopathy.
Mm.
And then it might also be what has gone on in the parental line. What is somebody carrying that their parents, their ancestors have not managed to transform in their lives, and that gets passed down the generations until there is someone who is courageous enough, wise enough to be able to deal with that. And then you might give a homeopathic remedy that deals with grandmother's situation. And you see the person. Um, I'll give you another example there. A woman came some time ago who I'd seen for a while, but I wasn't really getting to the bottom of it. She came this time with chronic insomnia, terrible insomnia. And she said, I can't stop working in my mind. I work all day long. I'm a herbalist. I work together with my husband growing plants. We sell them. We do all kinds of things. But even at night, I'm working, working, working. I can't stop. She had migraines. She had asthma. She felt that she was losing her memory. She had a whole list of complaints. And one of them was exhaustion because she wasn't sleeping. And then she said, it reminds me of my grandmother. She couldn't stop working either. When when she was a mother of five children, her husband died, and this was a long time ago. And the community said, "You won't be able to manage those five children on your own. We're going to take them away from you." And she said, "No, you're not." And so she took on many jobs. She worked and worked and worked, and she was always working. She didn't sleep. She was always working. And so my patient now, who wasn't losing her children, who wasn't in financial insecurity, it's like she was in that same pattern of her grandmother. So I gave her remedy that fit the grandmother situation, but also fit the physical situation, the physical symptoms of this patient, which is a well-known remedy called sanguinaria, which fit her migraines, her red face, her asthma, the insomnia, but also this continual working. And symptoms relieved, and we both had the feeling that grandmother was relieved as well.
How beautiful. And so in these
Fun. It's great fun. It's great fun.
and in these kinds of cases, it is really very interesting to think about what is exactly being healed here. I mean, what is being transformed? And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I mean the word karma comes to mind.
Absolutely.
Do you use that word and that understanding
I
of
don't, yes, absolutely. That karma simply means something that hasn't been resolved yet, and it's on cause and effect. So we're dealing with something from some past. It might be our own past. It might be our family past. I don't often use that word with my patients because it's a very charged word, and people always think, I don't believe in past lives. You don't need to believe in past lives to realize things from the past are here now because they need addressing. So it's a word that I believe in, but I don't often talk about it unless someone brings it up
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
it's such a charged word.
yeah. One of the ways in which I understand it, and one of the ways in which when we have a remedy that acts on that karmic level, is that almost karma is about the distance that we have created or that we've inherited between a kind of illusion and truth. Yeah. And the
Yeah,
remedy brings us out of the state of illusion and more and more and more into a realization of truth, the truth of ourselves, the truth of the reality in which we exist, the truth of the higher purpose, as Hahnemann himself was
yeah.
suggesting.
Yeah. Well, we talk about illusion, and yes, a great part of the time we do live in illusion because we're not living in the absolute here and now. And yet, where are we living? Where does our energy go? And perhaps at some level, and I think this is true, at some level, everything that is not here and now is illusion, and yet our energy can still be stuck in that, in our childhood, in the womb or whatever, And so our remedies can go into this illusionary realm, which when we're stuck in it is very, very real to us. We talk about delusion, but this is very real to us. This is what we're living. And beautifully, when that is healed, it feels like it just disappears. It feels like it's not there anymore because we're more present now. So
Yeah.
we are healing our delusions by being more and more present. But if you just say to someone, be here now, our famous Eckhart Tolle who lives in Canada now, it sounds so simple, be present, the power of now. Wow, it sounds simple, but it's not that easy to do all the time because large parts of us are somehow stuck in the past.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the really wonderful things to see when, with a good remedy, a patient comes more into their own being, comes more and being
Absolutely.
present.
You
Yeah.
become much more present.
Hmm.
And this is what heals the body as well. The body needs our healing presence. It needs us to actually be incarnated in the flesh. And when we take ourselves out of the future, projecting things onto the future, out of the past, that energy comes free to be used as healing energy in our body right here and now.
Hmm. Yeah. And so another way of putting it is that a remedy heals that distance that's created between our existence, that is to say, how we project ourselves out mentally into the world, and our being.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put.
Mm.
Yeah, well put. You've done your homework, Victor.
So, I'm wondering if we can perhaps wrap up the discussion by talking about some of your um, ideas or hopes, if you have them, about the future of homeopathy, where you see it going, or any ideas you might have about it, or yeah, anything on that topic that you might have to share.
Um, when I started homeopathy, everyone was very enthusiastic in those days, thinking, oh, within a short time, homeopathy is going to be the medicine. And well, it obviously isn't, and there's a lot of opposition to homeopathy, not only to homeopathy, but anything you might say alternative. Um, Uh, and to be honest, partly for good reason as well. Partly for good reason. We've put ourselves out there as we can heal everything, and yet we need to be so secure in what we're doing. And so there has been excellent homeopathy, and there has been some pretty shoddy, sloppy homeopathy as well. And it's not just our opponents, but it is we as homeopaths I mean, we've got to really get our act together and be very solid in our homeopathy. And so part of this opposition, what I hope that it can do is not just deter us from being homeopaths, but that it can help us to make us more solid. Say, hey, am I really secure in giving this remedy? Have I done my homework here? Because it's only in this way that we will be able to advance homeopathy to such an extent where we will be a reliable alternative to traditional medicine. And not only an alternative, but we will be able to work hand in hand with. We will know when to send someone to a psychiatrist, even to an internist. We will know when uh, they will know when they need an operation. We will be open to this. So, good homeopathy is just as much about knowing our limits as sorry, it is just about as much knowing our limits as it is about being good homeopaths. So I've had lots of conversations, of course, with Jan about this, and he said, yes, in the future, homeopathy will be the medicine. But he said it might take another 1,000 years. So don't pin all your hopes on it happening, even in our lifetime. We have to do the best we can and do that as and be together in this as well. I think study groups are wonderful. Exchanging, reading lots of information from various sources, and building up this body of information that creates a solid foundation for this art and science. It's I have great hopes for homeopathy, despite all the opposition to it. And it's not just homeopathy. This is opposition to, as I was saying, anything alternative. I think that this is truly the future of medicine. The old paradigm, not only for medicine, but also for the world paradigm, is quickly crumbling. You can see this at all levels. Um, Politically, ecologically, economically, our world is crumbling quickly. And astrologers know this. Astrologers have always pointed to this time, saying everything needs to crumble because we need to create something new. Now, what is that something new? Now, actually, I belong to a group of homeopaths, and it's called Quintessence Forum. And for about 5 years now, we've been putting things online exactly with the idea of helping to you might say, support this new paradigm. And so we will put things on ourselves. We put symposia on to talk about ideas that support this new paradigm of energy medicine, but also working together instead of in opposition to each other. We have, we want to create a bridge between science and spirituality. And so many of the people who we ask to speak are people like Lynn McTaggart, people in that field who have a very solid foundation in science and who are also broadening that. So it's called Quintessence Forum. It's free, it's available online. So this I see as the future. The future for homeopathy, the future for medicine, the future for our planet is developing this broader paradigm where it is in touch with nature, it's in touch with Mother Earth, it's in touch with spirit, it's in touch with Mother Earth in ourselves, spirit in ourselves, no longer looking for God only in the church, but God in ourselves. What is the power in ourselves? As you were saying, the whole universe is in this one little body, and let's get in touch with it.
Oh, wonderful. Um, any final thoughts or anything you'd like to leave our listeners with?
How long have you got? I would say, um, yeah, enjoy the ride. It's a wonderful ride. And if someone is going into homeopathy, I would say find your own way in that. Find what suits yourself, find what resonates with yourself, and keep looking, keep searching. There are many people out there who are presenting new ways. Find things that resonate with yourself, and explore in that, and dare to make mistakes. Dare to say, I just don't know. Dare to ask other people. Go into study groups, exchange. Um, Write up your cases, send them in, you know, exchange. But people, my colleagues get a bit pissed off with me because as soon as they tell me a good case, I always say, write it up and send it to me. We need to share our information. Yeah. So, because this is the future, it's sharing and it is being courageous.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you, Victor, and good luck with your site. Thank you.